join me in the prayer for illumination? O God, still our restless souls and quiet our anxious minds, that we might be aware of your presence among us in the hearing of your word. Change our hearts and inspire in us a deeper commitment and devotion to you, your children, and all creation. Amen. A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Hear the word of the Lord. You have heard that it was said to those who lived long ago, don't commit murder, and all who commit murder will be in danger of judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with their brother or sister will be in danger of judgment. If they say to their brother or sister, you idiot, they will be in danger of being condemned by the governing council. And if they say, you fool, they will be in danger of fiery hell. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift at the altar and go. First make things right with your brother or sister, and then come back and offer your gift. Be sure to make friends quickly with your opponents while you are with them on the way to court. Otherwise, they will haul you before the judge. The judge will turn you over to the officer of the court, and you will be thrown into prison. I say to you in all seriousness that you won't get out of there until you've paid the very last penny. Again you have heard that it was said to those who lived long ago, don't make a false solemn pledge, but you should follow through on what you have pledged to the Lord. But I say to you that you must not pledge at all. You must not pledge by heaven, because it's God's throne. You must not pledge by the earth, because it's God's footstool. You must not pledge by Jerusalem, because it's the city of the great King. And you must not pledge by your head, because you can't turn one hair white or black. Let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Moses says, "See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life, so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
As I've grown older, there are more and more moments that I don't remember as vividly as I once did. But the day I am about to tell you about is not one of them. Lisa and I had been married just a couple of months. I was working at Winthrop and Weinstein Law Firm, managing their mailroom and copy center in what was the St. Paul World Trade Center and is now the Wells Fargo Place building. I took the bus to and from there every day of the work week from our fourplex home near the intersection of Hennepin and Lake in the uptown neighborhood of Minneapolis. But on this particular day, Lisa picked me up from work. I think it was a Friday and we were headed out of town for some reason. I remember waiting outside when Lisa pulled up heading east on West 7th, just before the Cedar Avenue intersection. I got into the car, and at least this is my recollection, we sat there parked for a short while before Lisa began speaking. We were going to have a baby. After the initial surprise had subsided, my next emotion was pure excitement. We had always talked about how much both of us wanted children. We even knew at that time that we wanted 4 of them and had names chosen if all of them were girls. Emily, Hannah, Sarah, and Rachel. Boys' names we were having a more difficult time coming to any consensus, but we figured we had time. After the excitement came the traditional paternal fear and anxiety of whether or not I could or even should be a father. I have no idea what I'm doing. Perhaps I should have thought this whole thing through a little more. For the weeks that followed, this was my typical emotional response, ping-ponging between excitement and anxiety, but more excitement. We were going to have a baby. We had, with divine assistance, created a life, a son or daughter conceived in love, our family just begun, was already growing. But then only a month or 2 later, we were out of the country doing mission work, helping lead a vacation Bible school with 4 other members from our church in the tiny village of Curris, Scotland. The last couple days of our time there, Lisa began developing symptoms that led us to believe something might be wrong with the pregnancy. We wanted to wait until we got back to Minnesota, and so we did. Once home and a visit to the doctor, we learned that the pregnancy was ectopic. The fetus was growing in the fallopian tubes instead of the womb, and this was very dangerous, life-threatening to the mother, to Lisa. She would need surgery to remove the life growing inside of her immediately, and she did, and we did. There was really no choice here. I mean, of course, there's always a choice. But again, my memory is that despite our sadness, our grief, the loss of our hopes and dreams, all the beautiful moments we had visualized with our new son or daughter, we were in full agreement as to what needed to be done. There really was no choice. If Lisa did not have the surgery, the tube would eventually burst and the fetus would die, and Lisa's life would be in tremendous danger. It wasn't until years and a beautiful, healthy daughter later that I fully considered and made my peace with that decision and its consequences. But I believe in my heart that given an almost impossible decision, we chose life. When we think of what it means to be pro-life, to choose life, it is this type of life-defining moment that comes to mind, the life of an unborn child, that we most commonly argue about and fight over. But isn't the divine gift of life more than just this? And do we use this very limited definition of life to pat ourselves on the back while at the same time keeping us from wrestling with and addressing the vast scope and complexities of this life, this shared gift of life, and how it not only affects us, but how it affects all of the created order? For a man who complains about being slow of speech and slow of tongue, it turns out Moses is actually quite the gifted orator. The Israelites are perched at the edge of the Promised Land listening to Moses, who has been delivering speeches for what amounts to 30 chapters. Throughout the book of Deuteronomy, he has reiterated the stipulations of the law, peppering it with frequent reminders that when they enter the land, the Israelites must not worship any other gods. Then in these 6 verses, he provides the rousing rhetorical climax to all 30 chapters of talking. This is not a time for Moses to speak with subtlety or nuance. It is a time for stark dichotomies, life and death, blessing and curse, good and evil, prosperity and adversity. Service to the God of Israel yields life. Service to other gods yields death. Moses has laid it all out for the Israelites, and now the choice is left to them. The choice is left to us to choose life. But how do we define the life that God, through the prophet Moses, is asking us to choose? How do we define, as lovers of God and followers of Jesus, what it means to choose life? Do we define it narrowly as in only the life of an unborn child? Or do we define it more broadly as the life that we as children of God are called to share with all 7 billion of our brothers and sisters around the world? There is no doubt in my mind or in my heart that God is calling us all to choose this broader, deeper, all-encompassing definition of life. Life that includes the life of the unborn, but also the life that includes the marginalized, the oppressed, the ignored and forgotten, as well as the criminal, the abuser and the murderer. Life that includes the earth as our home and as the source of all that sustains us. To choose life means to choose life for everyone, not just ourselves and not just for the unborn, but also not excluding the unborn. Can we first acknowledge that being pro-life or pro-choice is a false dichotomy, and that none of us are truly one or the other? This is only one more way that the world tries to divide us. And we must not participate in such division and the hatred and violence that accompany it. As Moses so eloquently tells us, to be pro-life is a choice. And we are all pro-choice as long as we believe we have that choice to choose life. On the Sunday after Christmas, I mentioned an article I had read entitled 3 Words for the Church. We were wrong. In which the author, a Baptist minister named Mark Wingfield, outlines 7 different areas where the church needs to stand up, confess, and seek forgiveness for being wrong. This is number 4. We were wrong about what it means to be pro-life. He then elaborates. There's no denying that abortion is an important and difficult issue to consider morally and medically. But so are genocide, starvation, access to health care, slavery, human trafficking, capital punishment, and the injustices of war. The church has erred both spiritually and politically by elevating the single issue of abortion as the only definition of being pro-life. The result is an ugly kind of identity politics that has shut down dialogue and harmed the gospel. Personally, I don't think the author goes far enough in broadening our definition of life as Christians. While I hope by now we know that none of us are perfect, in fact, we are each one of us more than just a little broken, I believe it is hypocritical on the part of the church and our membership to say that we are pro-life and support the death penalty, even for our most violent and heinous criminals. I believe it is hypocritical to say that we are pro-life and deny climate change and its threat to the environment, specifically our human contribution to it. I believe it is hypocritical to say that we are pro-life, but only the lives of those of our brothers and sisters who look and sound and love and believe just like we do. I believe it is hypocritical to say that we are pro-life and not do everything in our power to contribute to the quality of life, the welfare and education of all our children, especially those children whose mothers and or fathers chose to have them despite the many challenges they would encounter in this world. Health challenges as well as the challenges of systemic and institutionalized poverty. Either pro-life means abundant, creative, sustainable, beautiful life for all God's children, or it means nothing at all. When God calls us to choose life, it is this broader, higher, deeper life that we are being called to choose, to stand up, to speak out, to work for. This is the work of the church, and we are the church. I continue to wrestle with what it means to always choose life. It is much more complex of a choice than Moses' words might lead us to believe. And sometimes the choice is between the life of one human being for the life of another human being. Or even the lives of a group of human beings for the lives of another group of human beings. In what cases does the death of one justify the lives of many? And what about the question of quality of life over quantity of life? I struggle tremendously with the practice of euthanasia, the accelerating of the end of life for the terminally ill, those experiencing excruciating pain, but for whom modern medicine can keep them alive for years, emotionally, financially, and spiritually draining their families. When it came to the end of my father's life, we talked together about how he defined life, his life, and what would be the moment when he no longer wanted procedures and treatments that did nothing more than keep his heart beating and his lungs drawing breath, keep him alive. He told us that for him, life was defined by his ability to communicate his thoughts and experiences, his hopes, his desires, his sufferings, his memories to the people that he loved. When he could no longer do that, his life was ostensibly over. When the time came, we obeyed his wishes, his definition of life. But by not continuing to do everything medically possible up until the very end, did we choose life? I believe we did. And I wouldn't do anything different, either with my father or my unborn son or daughter. To be pro-life or, for that matter, pro-choice, and again, I don't believe they are mutually exclusive. It has to be more than a bumper sticker on your car or a sign at the end of a stick. And it has to be broader than any single issue, any single example, any single life-defining moment. It is a commitment, a devotion, a faithfulness to the dignity, the freedom, and the opportunity of all of our brothers and sisters, and to the earth, our home itself. We are called to choose life, but we are also called to work for life, all of life. And we, the church, need to be having these conversations, no matter how painful and how fearful of losing relationships. We must be asking ourselves in all of our decision-making, are we choosing life? And if so, does the life we are choosing only benefit us, Or does it benefit all of God's created order? Because it makes a difference. And well, our lives depend upon it. I call heaven and earth to witness against us today that God has set before us life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that we may live, loving the Lord our God, obeying Him, and holding fast to it, for that means life to us and length of days. Choose life. Choose life. And to God alone be all the glory. Amen.